The massive Imperial scout ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of a yellow star system. Its sensors immediately detected signs of civilization: radio waves, light pollution, and artificial satellites orbiting multiple planets. Captain Reed of the Imperial Scout Force stood on his command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the third planet from the sun. "Primitive, but interesting," he muttered, noting the thousands of satellites cluttering the orbital space around the blue world. His sensors also picked up smaller colonies on the red fourth planet and the system's largest natural satellite. They'd managed to spread beyond their homeworld, at least. Following standard Imperial protocol, Reed ordered his communications officer to broadcast the Empire's standard greeting, a demand for immediate surrender and integration into the Galactic Empire. They had done this countless times before with other civilizations, and the result was always the same: either immediate surrender or a token resistance followed by surrender. The response they received, however, was unlike anything in Imperial records. A clear, crisp signal came through their communication system. The universal translator worked quickly, converting the alien language into standard Imperial speech. On the main screen, a human appeared: Captain James Smith of the Earth Defense Force. He was wearing what looked like a primitive pressure suit, but his posture and expression conveyed anything but primitiveness. "This is Captain Smith of the Earth Defense Force," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "We've received your demand for surrender." Reed straightened in his chair, preparing to deliver the standard speech about the benefits of Imperial rule. But before he could speak, Smith continued. "I've been authorized to respond to your demand," Smith said, then paused. A small smile crossed his face. "You really don't want to do this?" Reed blinked in confusion. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. "I don't think you understand your situation," he said. "The Galactic Empire spans 3/4 of this galaxy. Our military might is beyond your comprehension. We have conquered over 10,000 civilizations." Smith's smile didn't waver. "Impressive," he said. "And how many of those civilizations fought back?" The question caught Reed off guard. "Most saw reason and accepted Imperial rule peacefully," he said proudly. "Those who resisted were quickly subdued." "I see," Smith nodded. "And in all these conquests, how many wars has your empire actually fought? Real wars, I mean. Not just putting down rebellions or showcasing your superior technology to frighten less advanced civilizations into submission." Reed felt a strange unease growing in his stomach. The Empire's might alone is usually sufficient to... "You haven't answered my question," Smith interrupted. "Let me be more specific. When was the last time the Empire faced an enemy that had spent its entire history preparing for war? An enemy that developed its technology specifically for combat rather than convenience?" The unease in Reed's stomach grew stronger. He accessed his historical database quickly, but found no records of such encounters. "I thought so," Smith said, reading Reed's expression. "Well then, let me make something very clear. Humanity has spent its entire recorded history fighting wars. We've been killing each other in increasingly creative and effective ways for thousands of years. Every piece of technology we've developed, from our first stone tools to our latest quantum computers, has been shaped by warfare." Smith leaned closer to his camera. "Those colonies you detected on Mars and Luna, they're not just scientific outposts or civilian habitats. They're fortresses. Those thousands of satellites you see, not all of them are for communication or weather monitoring. And the space between them, well, let's just say we've learned a lot about hiding things in plain sight." "Are you threatening the Empire?" Reed asked, his voice barely concealing his shock. "Not at all," Smith replied calmly. "I'm warning you. There's a difference. A threat is what you do to intimidate someone. A warning is what you give someone because you don't want to hurt them." He paused again. "We don't want war, Captain Reed. We've had enough of it. But if you force us into one, You'll learn very quickly why every alien civilization that secretly observed Earth has chosen to keep their distance. The transmission ended, leaving Reed staring at a blank screen. For the first time in his career, he felt uncertain about standard Imperial protocol. Perhaps, he thought, this situation required a different approach. 3 days after the initial contact, the Imperial diplomatic vessel docked with the International Space Station. Ambassador White of the Galactic Empire had insisted on this meeting, confident that a direct demonstration of Imperial power would convince these humans to reconsider their position. The human delegation waited in the station's largest module, which had been quickly converted into a makeshift conference room. Admiral Tom Wilson stood at the viewport, watching the Imperial ship gleaming in Earth's orbit. Behind him, rows of screens covered the module's walls, each displaying different aspects of human history. When Ambassador White entered with his delegation, he expected to see primitive diplomats awed by their advanced environmental suits. Instead, he found the humans wearing simple clothes, completely at ease in their artificial environment. The station's life support systems were far more sophisticated than Imperial scans had suggested. "Welcome to the International Space Station," Admiral Wilson said, turning from the viewport. "We've prepared a presentation that we believe you should see before making any decisions about Earth." White settled into the offered seat, his translator working smoothly. "I appreciate your hospitality, but the Empire's position is non-negotiable. Integration is mandatory for all discovered civilizations." Wilson nodded slowly. "Before you maintain that position, let me show you something." He gestured to the screens around them. "This is human history. Specifically, this is our military history." The screens came to life, showing scenes that made the Imperial delegation shift uncomfortably in their seats. They watched as primitive humans fought with spears and swords, their battles bloody and brutal. The images progressed through time. The invention of gunpowder, the development of mechanized warfare, the horror of nuclear weapons. "In just the last century," Wilson explained, "we fought 2 wars that engulfed our entire planet. We called them world wars." He pointed to various screens showing the devastation of cities, the advancement of military technology, the rapid evolution of combat tactics. "Primitive," White said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Is it?" Wilson asked. He pressed a button, and new images appeared. "These are from our more recent conflicts. Notice how warfare changed. We developed stealth technology that makes our vehicles invisible to most detection systems. We created weapons that can strike targets on the other side of the planet with pinpoint accuracy. We built autonomous combat systems that can think and adapt faster than any human." The Admiral walked to a central screen showing a satellite image of Earth. "But here's what should really interest you, Ambassador. Everything you've seen. That's just what we do to ourselves. Imagine what we've prepared for external threats." White straightened in his chair. "Are you suggesting that your weapons could match Imperial technology?" "No," Wilson smiled. "I'm telling you our weapons were designed to counter technology exactly like yours." He pressed another button, and the screen showed detailed analyses of the Imperial scout ship's capabilities. "Your ships use energy shields calibrated to stop energy weapons and high-velocity impacts. But when was the last time you had to defend against a swarm of 10,000 microscopic drones, or projectiles that alter their mass after penetrating your shields?" "Impossible," one of White's advisors whispered. "Their technological level shouldn't allow." "You're measuring our technology by Imperial standards," Wilson interrupted. "That's a mistake. We didn't develop our technology to make life easier or more comfortable. We developed it to survive, to win. Every piece of technology we own has been tested in combat, refined through actual warfare, not just simulations." White stood up, his composure finally cracking. "The Empire has never failed to integrate a civilization. Never." "Then let us be your first success story of a different kind," Wilson said. "Success through peace. Because if you force this confrontation, I promise you one thing. He walked closer to White, his voice dropping. "We won't just defend Earth. We've spent thousands of years imagining how to fight enemies from the stars. We've prepared for this moment since we first looked up at the night sky and wondered if we were alone. If you start this war, you'll be facing an enemy that has spent its entire existence getting ready for you." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Outside the viewport, Earth turned slowly, its surface dotted with lights. Cities that had risen from the ashes of countless wars, ready to survive one more if they had to. The Imperial fleet arrived exactly 1 week after the failed diplomatic meeting. 100 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their massive forms blocking out the stars as they positioned themselves between Mars and Earth. Fleet Commander Jones watched them through the bridge window of the Earth Defense Force flagship Defender, his expression calm despite the situation. "They sent exactly what we expected," he said to his crew. "A standard subjugation fleet. They still think we're primitive." On the Imperial command ship, Admiral Green of the Empire surveyed the human solar system with confidence. His fleet had crushed rebellions across 50 star systems. These humans, despite their bold words, would surely surrender at the sight of Imperial might. "Send the final warning," he ordered. "They have 1 hour to surrender before we begin our attack." The message went out, broadcast across all frequencies. The response came almost immediately, but not in the form they expected. Instead of words, they received a simple audio file, the sound of a clock ticking. "What is the meaning of this?" Green demanded. His answer came from his sensor officer. "Sir, energy readings. Everywhere. There." Suddenly, space itself seemed to come alive. Hidden doors opened on every moon, asteroid, and space station in the system. Objects that Imperial scans had dismissed as debris transformed, unfolding like deadly flowers. The humans had turned their entire solar system into one massive defensive grid. "Impossible," Green whispered. His scans showed weapons platforms emerging from hiding places throughout the asteroid belt. More platforms rose from the dark side of Mars, and from what they had thought were simple mining operations on Jupiter's moons. On the Defender, Jones gave a simple command: "Begin." The first wave of human attacks didn't come from their ships. Instead, thousands of tiny objects, each no bigger than a coin, accelerated toward the Imperial fleet. The Empire's powerful shields, designed to stop energy weapons and large projectiles, didn't even register these microscopic threats. "Minimal damage reported," Green's officer announced with relief. Then his eyes widened. "Wait, the small impacts. They're multiplying." The tiny projectiles were self-replicating nanomachines. Each one that struck an Imperial ship began converting the hull material into more of itself. Within minutes, entire sections of Imperial ships were being consumed, transformed into more weapons to attack other ships. "Launch fighters," Green ordered. "Target their weapon platforms." Imperial fighters poured from the warships, only to meet their own nightmare. Swarms of autonomous drones emerged from hidden bases on Mars moons. Unlike Imperial fighters, which still relied on living pilots, these human drones operated as a single mind, adapting their tactics in microseconds. "Sir," Jones's tactical officer reported, "the Empire is responding exactly as the simulations predicted. They're launching fighters in standard attack formation." Jones nodded. "Release the EMPs." Electromagnetic pulse weapons, hidden in what had appeared to be communication satellites, activated simultaneously. The pulses, specifically calibrated to the Imperial ships' operating frequencies, wreaked havoc on their systems. Ships that had never needed heavy electromagnetic shielding found themselves going dark. In his increasingly chaotic command center, Green watched in horror as his mighty fleet was being taken apart by weapons he had dismissed as primitive. His shield generators, useless against the nanite swarms, were draining power trying to stop the constant barrage of conventional missiles, now launching from bases on Mars and Luna. "How?" he demanded. "How did they hide all this?" On the Defender, Jones watched the Imperial fleet's formation break apart. "Send the message," he ordered. Across all frequencies, Imperial ships received the same transmission. "This is the Earth Defense Force. What you're experiencing is only our first line of defense. You have 10 minutes to retreat before we activate our second-tier weapons. Unlike these, the next wave won't be designed to disable. They will destroy. Run." Green stared at the message, then at his fleet status display. Already, 30 ships were completely dark, their systems corrupted by human weapons. The mighty Imperial subjugation fleet, which had never failed before, was facing something they had never prepared for. An enemy that had spent centuries preparing specifically for this moment. "All ships," Green transmitted, his voice shaking. "Emergency retreat. Full withdrawal from the system." As his ship turned to flee, he realized with growing dread that the humans hadn't just been warning them. They had been showing mercy. In the Imperial capital's war room, high-ranking officers stared at the battle footage from Earth with growing horror. The mighty subjugation fleet, now limping back to Imperial space, had been thoroughly defeated by weapons that shouldn't have existed. "Play it again," ordered High Commander Stone, his eyes fixed on the massive screen. He watched as the tiny human nanomachines ate through Imperial hull plating like hungry insects. How did they develop such weapons without us detecting their capability? The Empire's chief scientist, Dr. Black, stepped forward. "Sir, we've analyzed their technology. It's different. They didn't follow the normal path of technological development. While we focused on making our ships bigger and our energy weapons more powerful, they went small, microscopic. Their weapons aren't just machines. They're alive." Stone turned to him. "Explain." "Look at this," Black said, bringing up new images. "Their nanites aren't just programmed. They evolve. Each generation learns from the previous one. During the battle, they were actually adapting to our defenses in real time. And their drone swarms." He shook his head. "They don't just follow commands. They think. They learn. They hunt." On another screen, footage showed Imperial fighters being overwhelmed by human combat drones. The drones moved like a school of fish, splitting and reforming, each movement precise and purposeful. When Imperial pilots adapted to one tactic, the swarm immediately changed its approach. "Their entire solar system is one giant trap," the tactical officer added. "Those asteroids we thought were mining operations, weapon factories, the space debris, disguised sensors, even their civilian satellites are part of their defense network. They've spent decades, maybe centuries, preparing for this." Stone walked to the window overlooking the Imperial capital city. "And now they have our faster-than-light technology." "The scout ships." "Yes, sir," Black confirmed. "They didn't just study our scout ships. They understood them, improved them. Our latest reports suggest they're already building their own versions, but with modifications we never considered." A junior officer rushed into the room, holding a datapad. "Sir, we're detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of Imperial space. Multiple signatures, appearing and disappearing at random." Stone's face paled. "They're already here, aren't they? Testing our defenses, learning our patrol patterns." "Most likely," Black agreed, "and we have no way to track them effectively. Their stealth technology operates on principles we barely understand. They don't try to hide their energy signatures. They mask them by making them look like natural phenomena." The tactical officer brought up a new display showing Imperial space. "Sir, look at these patterns. The energy signatures, they're not random. They're mapping our defense networks, our supply lines, our communication relays. They're thinking like raiders," Stone finished, "like guerrilla fighters." He turned to face his staff. "We've spent thousands of years fighting conventional wars with overwhelming force. But these humans, they've spent their history fighting against superior forces, learning to survive against stronger enemies. And now they're applying those lessons against us. Another alert sounded. More screens lit up with reports from across Imperial space. Patrol ships were reporting ghost signatures. Communication relays were experiencing mysterious failures. Supply ships were reporting course corrections due to unexplained gravitational anomalies. They're not just studying us, Black realized. They're playing with us, showing us just enough to make us understand what they can do, but not enough for us to counter it. Stone sank into his chair, finally understanding the true meaning of the human's warning. The Empire had never lost a war because they had never really fought one. They had conducted police actions, crushed rebellions, forced surrenders. But this was different. Send word to all commands, he ordered. Full defensive alert. And, he hesitated, begin analyzing all our standard protocols. The humans have been watching us, learning our patterns. We need to change everything before they decide to strike for real. As his officers rushed to comply, Stone looked again at the footage from Earth. The humans hadn't just defeated an Imperial fleet. They had changed the rules of warfare itself. And somewhere out there in the darkness of space, they were preparing their next move. The Imperial border station's sensors picked up the human ships too late. By the time the alarm sounded, Earth's vessels had already vanished, leaving behind only the wreckage of the station's communication array. Similar reports flooded in from across Imperial space, quick, precise strikes that disappeared before defenders could respond. On the bridge of the Earth ship Ghost, Captain Miller watched his tactical display with satisfaction. His ship, along with 30 others, had been striking Imperial targets for the past week. They weren't trying to destroy the Empire. They were teaching it to fear the dark. Another successful hit, his tactical officer reported. The Imperial response time is getting better, but they're still too slow. Miller nodded. They're learning, but not fast enough. He looked at the display showing their next target. How many Imperial ships are guarding the fuel depot? 5 patrol vessels, standard formation. The tactical officer smiled. They still haven't figured out that we can see through their stealth systems. The humans had reverse-engineered more than just the Empire's faster-than-light drives. They had studied every piece of Imperial technology they could find, not to copy it, but to defeat it. While the Empire had relied on the same basic designs for centuries, humans had developed countless ways to fight. Launch the decoys, Miller ordered. Small drones shot out from the Ghost, each one projecting energy signatures identical to human warships. The Imperial patrol reacted exactly as expected, spreading out to engage what they thought were multiple threats. They never saw the real attack coming. Microscopic machines, similar to the ones that had devastated the Imperial fleet at Earth, silently invaded the fuel depot's systems. But these weren't meant to destroy. These were data hunters, copying every piece of information they could find. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving signals from Teams 2 and 3. They've completed their missions in the Centauri and Orion sectors. The Imperial military is spreading itself thin, trying to protect everything at once." Miller allowed himself a small smile. This was warfare as humanity had perfected it over thousands of years, not just about destroying the enemy, but about breaking their will to fight. The Empire had never faced an opponent who understood this kind of psychological warfare. On the Imperial capital world, the High Command was in chaos. Reports of human attacks came from everywhere and nowhere. Their mighty fleets chased shadows while real strikes happened elsewhere. Supply lines were disrupted, communication networks compromised, and worst of all, their own technology seemed to be turning against them. "New contact," Miller's sensor officer announced. "Imperial heavy cruiser, just dropped out of FTL." "Right on schedule," Miller said. The humans had learned to predict Imperial response patterns. Begin Phase 2. The Ghost and its companion ships revealed themselves, seeming to appear from nowhere around the Imperial cruiser. But instead of attacking, they'd broadcast a message on all frequencies. "Attention Imperial vessel. Look around you. Look how easily we found you. Look how easily we could destroy you. But we won't. Instead, we want you to deliver a message." The Imperial captain watched in helpless fury as human ships circled his vessel like wolves around prey. His weapons couldn't lock onto them. Their stealth systems were far beyond anything the Empire had encountered. The message continued. "We could have hit your core worlds by now. We could have struck at your shipyards, your capitals, your civilian populations. But we haven't, because unlike you, we know the true cost of war. We've lived it, breathed it. This is your final warning. Leave Earth alone, or learn why every species that has ever studied us chose to keep their distance." As quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished, leaving the Imperial cruiser untouched but shaken. In the following days, similar scenes played out across Imperial space. The humans weren't just fighting a war. They were conducting a masterclass in military strategy, teaching the Empire lessons written in humanity's blood over countless centuries. Back on the Ghost, Miller received new orders from Earth Command. Phase 3 approved. He read aloud to his crew. Time to show them what happens when humanity stops holding back. The Imperial Council chamber had never been so quiet. 12 of the Empire's highest-ranking officials sat around the massive table, watching holographic displays of the latest human attacks. Emperor Ross himself sat at the head of the table, his face grim as report after report came in. "They've destroyed nothing crucial," General Brown reported, his voice shaking slightly. "They've killed almost no one. Every attack has been precise, calculated, and educational." "Educational?" the Emperor asked. "Yes, my lord. They're teaching us." Brown brought up a new hologram showing attack patterns across Imperial space. "Look at their targets. Communication arrays disabled but not destroyed. Supply lines disrupted but not cut. Military bases infiltrated but left intact. They're showing us all the ways they could hurt us, without actually doing so." Dr. Black, the Empire's chief scientist, stepped forward. "My lord, we've finished our analysis of human historical records. What we found is disturbing." He pressed a button, and the room filled with images of Earth's wars. Their entire history is a series of conflicts, but not like our conflicts. Not simple shows of force or quick surrenders. "Explain," the Emperor commanded. "Their wars." Black paused, searching for words. "They're complex, layered. They don't just fight with weapons. They fight with information, with economics, with psychology. They've developed something they call hybrid warfare, using everything from computer networks to social systems as weapons." Another official spoke up. "But their technology is inferior to ours." "No," Black corrected, "not inferior. Different. We built our technology for convenience, for comfort, for easy victories. They built theirs for survival." He showed scans of human weapons. "Look at this. Their drones don't just follow orders, they think. Their computers don't just process data, they evolve. Their weapons aren't just tools, they're alive." The Emperor leaned forward. "How did we miss this? How did our scouts not see?" "Because we were looking for the wrong things," Brown answered. "We measured them by our standards. We saw their cities and counted buildings. We should have counted scars. We saw their satellites and measured communications. We should have measured weapons. We saw their division and thought them weak. We should have recognized that they were strong enough to survive their own wars." A new alert flashed across the screens. More human ships had been detected, but this time they weren't hiding. They were in plain sight, sitting just outside weapons range of major Imperial facilities across 6 sectors. "They're not even bothering to hide anymore," someone whispered. "They don't need to," Brown replied. "Phase 3, they called it. They're done teaching. Now they're demonstrating." The Emperor stood, walking to the main display. "All this time, we thought we were the masters of warfare because we conquered so many worlds. But we never fought real wars. We never had to." He turned to face his council. "These humans, they're not just warriors. They're teachers, and they're giving us a choice. Learn or learn the hard way." "My lord," Black said quietly, "There's something else. We found out why they warned us to run, why they keep holding back." He projected one final image, a human historical record. They've been through wars that nearly destroyed their world. They know exactly how much damage they could do to us, because they've already done it to themselves. They don't want to destroy us because they know exactly what destruction costs. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. The Empire had spent centuries believing itself invincible, never realizing that true strength came not from winning easy victories, but from surviving hard defeats. "Send word to all commands," the Emperor finally said. "All offensive operations against Earth are to cease immediately." He looked around the room. "It's time we learned a different lesson from humanity. Sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when not to fight." As if in response, the human ships outside Imperial installations began to pull back, leaving behind a final message: "Class dismissed. The next lesson will be much less pleasant." 1 month after the Empire's decision to cease hostilities, representatives from both civilizations met on neutral ground, a newly constructed space station halfway between Earth and the nearest Imperial colony. The station itself was a testament to the different approaches of both species, built with Imperial materials but designed with human defensive systems. Admiral Wilson stood at the observation deck, watching the Imperial diplomatic vessel dock. Beside him, Captain Miller of the Ghost studied the Imperial ship's design. "They've already started modifying their ships," Miller noted. "Look at the hull. They're implementing our layered armor concept." Wilson nodded. "They learn fast when they want to. That's why we're here today." The Imperial delegation entered the room, led by Ambassador White, the same diplomat who had once dismissed humanity as primitive. His expression was different now, showing respect rather than condescension. Behind him walked Emperor Ross himself, something unprecedented in Imperial history. The Empire's ruler had never before traveled to meet another species. "Welcome to Unity Station," Wilson said, stepping forward. "We appreciate you making this journey personally, Emperor." The Emperor looked around the room, noting the subtle defensive measures built into every surface. "You've taught us more in 1 month than we learned in 1,000 years of conquest," he said simply. "We're here to ensure we learn the right lessons from this experience." The meeting room was arranged with chairs in a circle, another human touch that the Imperial protocol officers had initially resisted. There was no high table, no throne. Everyone sat as equals. "The Empire formally recognizes Earth and all human colonies as a sovereign power," White announced, reading from an official document. "We seek not subjugation, but alliance." Wilson smiled. "That's why we're really here, isn't it? Not just to make peace, but because you've seen something that frightens you even more than we do." The Emperor nodded grimly. "Our long-range scouts have detected signals from beyond the galaxy's edge. Something is out there, something that makes your warning to us seem gentle by comparison." "We know," Miller said quietly. "We've been watching them for years. That's another reason we developed our technology the way we did. We weren't just preparing for you." Displays lit up around the room, showing human deep space scans. The Empire had missed the signals because they were looking for standard energy patterns. Humans, with their history of hiding from superior forces, had learned to look for things that didn't want to be found. "This is why we fought you the way we did," Wilson explained. "We needed you to understand. The Empire's way of warfare, overwhelming force, standard tactics, predictable responses, it won't work against what's coming. We needed you to learn flexibility, adaptability, and most importantly, humility." The Emperor stood, walking to the window that showed both fleets stationed outside. Imperial ships now flew in formations they had learned from humans, while human ships displayed technology they had refined from Imperial designs. "Then let us learn from each other," the Emperor said. "Your experience in warfare, combined with our industrial capacity and reach, your adaptability, merged with our stability, your creativity, enhanced by our resources." Wilson handed over a data crystal. This contains full technical specifications for our defensive systems and our analysis of the extragalactic signals. Consider it a gesture of trust and an investment in our shared future. The Emperor accepted it with a slight bow. And we offer you full access to our FTL network and our shipyards. Together, we can prepare for what comes next. As the formal alliance was signed, Miller turned to Wilson. Do you think they understand why we really held back? Why we chose to teach rather than destroy? Wilson watched as human and Imperial officers began sharing information, already planning joint defense strategies. They're starting to. War taught us that victory means nothing if you destroy everything worth fighting for. Sometimes the strongest weapon is the one you choose not to use. Outside the station, ships from both civilizations began joint patrol maneuvers, practicing formations that combined Imperial power with human cunning. The galaxy was changing, preparing for a threat that would require the best of both civilizations to face. Humanity had warned the Empire to run. Instead, they had taught them to stand and fight, not as conquerors, but as allies preparing for a war that would determine the fate of not just one species, but all who called the galaxy home.